Great, thank you. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. So we'll provide a brief presentation of the Clean Buildings Performance Standard and the specific K12 guidance, and then we'll open the floor to questions later on. Feel free to add your questions into the chat. So this slide represents our agency's purpose. Commerce touches every aspect of community and economic development. Here at Commerce, we strengthen communities. So this is the Clean Buildings team here at Commerce. As you can see, it's a very small team. Our program falls under the State Energy Office. So for today's agenda, we'll provide, again, a brief recap of the standard. Then Luke will cover the specifics of the K12 guidance, kind of go over some examples. And then we'll also provide information on the customer support program and the incentive program. We received some questions ahead of time, and we'll start with those, and then we'll make our way to the chat. So the Clean Buildings Law was authorized into House Bill 1257 in the 2019 legislative session. So it was based on ASHRAE Standard 100, which covers energy efficiency in existing buildings. So this is the reference standard. So Commerce developed amendments to the standards to conform with the Clean Buildings legislation. And these amendments can be found under WAC 19450. So you can find an integrated document on our website, and I will be emailing you a link to get access to that document after the class. And then, so the law charged Commerce with rulemaking, notifying building owners, administering incentives, and supporting mandatory compliance. Feel free to look for more information and resources on our website, and that's our email address. So Luke, take it away.
All right, thank you, Anlin. So the Clean Buildings Performance Standard applies to existing Tier 1 buildings, which are formerly known as covered commercial buildings. A Tier 1 building is where the sum of non-residential hotel, motel, and dormitory floor areas exceeds 50,000 gross square feet, excluding any parking garages. There are also Tier 2 buildings now as of last spring, when the legislation passed the Clean Buildings Expansion Law. Tier 2 buildings are buildings between 20 and 50,000 square feet. We're going to focus on the Tier 1 buildings today. There are some exemptions for buildings. And I also want to define what a building complex is, because the standard, there's some nuances in the language. So there are buildings and there are building complexes. So both buildings, individual buildings and building complexes can be Tier 1 buildings as defined by the standard. So a complex is a group of buildings interconnected by conditioned spaces on contiguous property. Next slide, please. Okay, initial compliance with the Clean Buildings Performance Standard is staggered over a 3-year period, starting with the largest buildings beginning in June of 2026. Future compliance is based on a 5-year cycle from these initial compliance dates. So owners of covered commercial buildings are responsible for compliance with the standard by these scheduled compliance dates in order to avoid penalty. So it's a process-oriented standard with long lead times to help keep compliance costs down. It is most cost-effective to start a compliance process early. Next slide, please. All right, this slide is a flow chart of the path to compliance. There are a few different compliance paths. I'll go through them in pretty good detail here, but there is a compliance path called compliance through exemption. If you qualify for an exemption, you still have to apply for it and be granted eligibility and compliance through exemption by Commerce. This does the standard is a 5-year cycle. Complying through exemption and gaining compliance through exemption for the first cycle, you will need, doesn't stay with the building for its lifespan, you need to reapply for that every cycle, so every 5 years. The primary compliance paths are the investment criteria path you see here and meeting the EUIT path. So one of those two paths. Meeting the energy use intensity target is the requirement that the building's measured EUI be equal to or less than the established target. And the investment criteria compliance path is requires an ASHRAE level 2 energy audit and a life cycle cost analysis performed in accordance with Annex X of the standard. This will identify all energy efficiency measures deemed to be cost effective. And those energy efficiency measures would need to be installed, and measurement and verification of the predicted savings would need to be measured and verified by the compliance state. So if the building is not eligible to apply for exemption, it's get started as soon as possible. And to start compliance or pursuit of compliance, the first step is benchmarking. Benchmarking will help determine whether a building can pursue the energy use intensity target or if it needs to go down the investment criteria path. So the Clean Buildings Performance Standard requires a portfolio manager account, Energy Star portfolio manager. That's the accounting system for the that we use for the standard. I imagine most of you are familiar with the Energy Star portfolio manager. So benchmarking starts with creating an account. You work with the building's utility companies to upload consumption data to the account to create an EUI for the building. The EUIT can be developed concurrently with the EUI. So the EUIT, again, is the energy use intensity target, and the EUI is the energy use intensity for the building, so how it performs. All of this is outlined in section 7.2 of the standard as far as creating the target is concerned. And it can be created within the Clean Buildings portal. So that's the database that we've developed for clean buildings documentation. If an EUI or an EUIT cannot be created for a building, the alternative compliance path, as I've mentioned, is the investment criteria metric. There are some exceptions in 7.2 regarding creation of the EUIT. So if you have questions on how to create that target, you can refer to section 7.2 and make sure to check out those exceptions. So in addition to the performance metrics of either the EUIT or meeting the EUIT or the investment criteria, in order to gain compliance with the standard, you must develop and implement an operations and maintenance program and an energy management plan in accordance with the standard. The operations and maintenance program is intended to improve building operation and efficiency without significant costs. It is recommended that this program be developed and implemented as soon as possible. A successfully implemented O&M program could lower the building's EUI significantly enough to meet the EUIT in some cases without capital improvement costs. So get started on that early. Hopefully you can realize some savings from the implementation of that O&M program. And again, each compliance path is good for one cycle and must be submitted every 5 years. Next slide, please. This slide illustrates an example timeline for activities leading to compliance for buildings with a compliance deadline of June 1st of 2026. So if the building or building complex is over 220,000 square feet, June 1st, 2026 is the compliance date. Actual project timelines may vary, but we're just representing one example here. As you can see, some of these tasks may take several months to accomplish. Next slide, please. All right, so a little bit about definitions here, and I'm going to go quickly through the definitions, not get into too much detail, but K12 schools refer to buildings or campuses used as a school for kindergarten through 12th grade students. A building complex is defined within the Clean Buildings Performance Standard as a group of buildings interconnected by conditioned space on contiguous property. And contiguous property is not directly defined within the standard, but contiguous property is adjoining property under sole ownership. Next slide. So really the purpose of this presentation and Q&A session today is to talk about some of the K12 challenges and how Congress has responded to these challenges. So the intent of the standard is to require compliance on an individual building or building complex level and not on a campus level. This was in the legislation. Thus, the rules were developed to reflect such intent. Under further consideration, Congress recognizes that many K12 school campuses are commonly served by a single meter, a master meter, or a couple master meters serving a number of structures with the same building type and usage. This places the burden of investing in submetering in order to comply through the EUIT for those tier 1 buildings on the campus, or compliance through the investment criteria on the majority of K12 schools in the state. Furthermore, K12 school energy use intensity targets were developed using average regional and national energy use intensity data from a campus-wide level and not at a building level. So that kind of conflicts with the legislation intended to be at the building level. Therefore, compliance at the building level may not accurately reflect the average targets developed for the Clean Building Performance Standard. Next slide, please. So in response to these metering challenges, Congress will allow for compliance with the standard at the campus level in lieu of compliance at the individual tier 1 building or tier 1 complex level. This will allow for more compliance under the EUIT performance metric and eliminate some of the costs involved with the investment criteria or submetering of the covered tier 1 building or building complex. Next slide, please. This is just an example. It's a good visual representation of a school, K12 school campus. You can see that we have a building here that's quite large, and we have quite a few auxiliary structures, including what appears to be portables. So we would consider this a campus. So the covered tier 1 building, in addition to the auxiliary buildings, not interconnected through conditioned space. Next slide, please. Here's another example. It looks like we have 2 main buildings here interconnected through what appears to be breezeways. Let's just say they're breezeways. As intended by the rules of the standard and the definition of building complex, these 2 large buildings would not be a building complex if those 2 connecting portions are breezeways and not conditioned space. If those were hallways that were conditioned, those 2 buildings would be considered a single building complex. You can see that there's also what appears to be some auxiliary buildings, possibly portables, on the property as well. And obviously those are not interconnected through conditioned space. Next slide, please. So a little bit more detail about the definition of K12 school. So when developing the EUIT for a K12 tier 1 building complex or campus, that would include the building activity type listed in table 7-2A, which identifies the target for a K12 school. This is defined as buildings that house classrooms, administrative spaces, conference rooms, kitchens, etc. So that would fall under the target for K12 schools, which is either 49 or 48, depending on if it's a high school or a K-8 school. Next slide, please. Okay, so if the building complex, building, or campus fits or contains spaces listed in the previous slide, you can use the K12 target for the whole complex or campus. If there are any spaces within the building not listed within that definition, you can do an area weighted average of the energy use target. So spaces that are not listed within that definition but are part of the campus, you would determine the gross floor area ratio of those spaces and find the most appropriate target within the table 7-2A to incorporate into an area weighted average. An example of this could be high schools with a swimming pool. The target developed for K12 schools does not include swimming pools. So if you have a high school with a swimming pool, you can include that into the target development by using the appropriate target listed in 7-2A. And I can't think offhand what that target is, but it's higher than the 49 identified for a high school. And that will give you a blended area weighted target based on the ratio of floor area that the pool consists of relative to the rest of the building. Next slide, please. So K12 schools that include a cafeteria serving multiple complexes. So this is a consideration that probably most school districts see. You may have a central cafeteria that's serving various schools. If you do have such a facility, such a campus, you can use the restaurant cafeteria target from 7-2A and do a weighted average for that facility. Now we allow that because we understand that the central cafeteria is going to have a higher energy use intensity than because it's serving multiple schools than your standard cafeteria within a K12 school. Next slide, please. All right, Annalyn,
Okay. Thank you so much, Luke. So we know that the performance standard can get complicated, and we just like to know, remind you that we're here to help. So if you haven't been to our website, please check it out. This is kind of our main source to communicate through our website and through our bulletin. Be sure to subscribe to our bulletin because that's where we like to communicate anything new, any updates, any new resource or tool that we have to put out. So there's several resources on our website. We have a documentation library where you'll find guidance, flowcharts, and tools. And it's you can just search by a keyword and you can find the different documents associated with that word. You can see the page on how to comply, which just kind of gives you the general steps of the compliance process. And it has helpful links. If you visit the customer support and resources section, then you'll find just various other resources outside of what we offer. and the resources are broken down into different categories. Also, from the main page, you can access the early adopter incentive program and the Clean Buildings portal. So speaking of the portal, if you're not familiar with it yet, it's a database of all the tier 1 buildings and provides building owners a secure way to manage their buildings compliance with the Clean Building Standard. There you can submit applications for the incentive program, and once the exemption application is available, that's where you'll also apply. So we suggest that even though you're not like ready to submit any kind of compliance or application now, it's just best to connect with us, just so you could see what kind of information that we have for your building and to make sure the square footage is accurate, and you can get shared access, which means that this individual, whether it be your consultant or someone within your organization, will have access to the building's profile, and they can submit application and compliance documents. Okay. Various organizations, including electric and gas utility companies throughout Washington, have literature and incentive programs designed to support the same stakeholders as we do. So here's a list of the links and organizations, and they're listed on the customer support and research page. Rebecca Shepard, I believe she's joining us today. Do you want to say hello, Rebecca? She is with the Smart Building Center, and she provides just one-on-one consultation with building owners to help them with compliance. She's just an kind of an extension of me, who also focuses on customer support.
Sure. Thank you, Annalyn. My name is Rebecca Shepard. I work with the Northwest Energy Efficiency Council, and through the Smart Building Center, we're offering a Clean Buildings Performance Standard help desk with a resource page and links to previous trainings we have conducted and other organizations have conducted. And we're also offering one-on-one consultation. I used to work for a school district until February last year, so I'm familiar with the struggles and hurdles you are facing. So I would be more than happy to help and guide you through this and connect you with the resources and get you started onto a good track to find compliance. We also offer a BOC training. It's the Builders Operators Certification Program, which has 3 levels: the fundamentals, the level 1, and the level 2. And if you go all the way through the level 2 training, you will actually be qualified to serve as a qualified person for your district. So I will post a couple links into the chat, one to the Clean Buildings Performance Standard Help Desk, and one to the BOC training. And then we also offer a tool lending library where you can check out tools within Washington and Oregon for free. These tools can be really used to help identify energy efficiency opportunities in your district, so you can lower your energy consumption and hopefully meet your EOI target. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Wonderful resources with them. Check them out. All right, Annika, tell us about the incentive program.
Great, thank you so much. The Early Adopter Incentive Program is available for buildings who would like to move forward with early compliance with the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. Next slide, thank you. So the total funding for the incentive program is $75 million, and we have lots of funding available. So we are here, like Annalyn said, we are here to help. It's a performance-based incentive of 85 cents a square foot, and it's administered through Commerce, Utilities, and the Department of Revenue. So we all work together in coordination to communicate about applications and funding available. Here we have the RCW that was provided to us as a legislator that requires utilities to participate if they serve more than 25,000 customers in their territory. So, and if you are in a service area where your utility serves less than 25,000 customers, you can request for them to participate. We are going through that process right now with the city of Ellensburg. This is a state incentive, and it can be administered with utility conservation incentives. So that means that the slide that Annalyn posted earlier with all of the utilities and incentives they have available, we encourage you to use both. You could use their incentives as funding as you move forward, and then use our incentive if you achieve your target. So qualifications for this program is the building must be a tier 1 covered commercial building or multifamily building with over 50,000 square feet of gross floor area. The tier 1 covered building means where the sum of the non-residential hotel, motel, and dormitory floor area exceeds 50,000 gross square feet. You must have one participating utility, gas company, or thermal energy company providing or delivering services. And your building must be 15 weather normalized EUI above its target. That is one of the major components of this incentive program. Is you have to have your energy use intensity, your weather normalized energy use intensity that is 15 above. And in order to receive this incentive, you must meet or exceed your target. That means that you've met your target and you've also brought your building into full compliance with the Clean Buildings Performance Standards. So all of the metrics there that apply to this performance standard, you're meeting those early, and that's the process towards receiving the incentive. Next slide, please.
And that's it. Thank you so much, Annika. Let's move on to some questions. There's a few questions that came in ahead of time. We're just going to go through that, and then Annika will go to the chat.
Perfect.
Okay, first question, Luke, hot seat. Are portable classrooms part of the square footage or only the main building?
That's a good question. So this new K12 guidance allows for compliance with the EUIT path for a full campus of K12 school. That includes portables, unless the portable is unoccupied and otherwise not used by human occupation. So in those cases where you have a portable that's pretty much mothballed, that square footage would not be included in the EUI developed for the campus. But other portables that are used for school purposes, you can use the gross floor area in development of the EUI. Now, if, again, this guidance allows you to comply through a campus level, but you can also still comply on the individual tier 1 building level. If you were complying with it on the tier 1 building level and the portables are metered with the tier 1 building, you would need to include the GFA of the building of the portable, unless that portable is submetered, and you can either deduct from the master meter from that submetering, or if it's just totally metered independently from the tier 1 building, you wouldn't have to deduct it, but that GFA would not be included in the tier 1 EUI if the energy use is not used.
Thanks, Luke. Next question. It's mainly for OSPI. Randy, can you take this one?
Yeah, I can take this one. Just overall, the Superintendent Reichdahl, he requested $5 million in his 23-25 capital budget request to the governor and legislature to provide energy assessment grants to our small school districts. So these are districts under 1,000. The funding will allow districts to hire independent professional consultants to perform facility energy assessments. And the data collected from the assessments will inform our small school district officials on how best to reduce facility energy use and make informed decisions on needed building system improvements. And then our small district can use this information to apply for our small district modernization grant program. in the past, we've noticed that a lot of our small districts have applied for planning and construction grants to make needed improvements to their building system. So that will help our small school districts meet the requirements of the clean building legislation. So that's all we have right now. I can't comment on the Wakayakum lawsuit, so I can't address that question. But the superintendent did ask for funding in the next budget cycle to only help our small school districts.
Thanks, Randy. I appreciate it. Next set of questions. Luke, so I know we provided some examples, so let's go on to the second one. Regardless of the guidance, discuss long-term benefits of campus building submetering relative to proactive energy management and carbon reduction. And regardless, again, of the guidance, discuss potential benefits of the investment criteria compliance for school campuses, if any.
Okay, well, there are benefits to having submetering and individual metering of buildings on your campus. The more granular you get, the easier it is to identify potential energy performance issues. The O&M program and the energy management plan, the intent of those attributes of the standard is to encourage effective management and of the buildings themselves. And if you have the more granular the metering, the better you're going to be able to identify these concerns and issues, and even kind of benchmark your building against the average. So there are long-term benefits of submetering. The investment criteria, requires a level 2 ASHRAE audit, energy audit, every cycle if you're going to be compliant through the investment criteria every cycle. And obviously there are some great benefits to having that audit every 5 years, so you can really get into the details of how the building's performing, much more so than just evaluating the energy data from the meters. There may be buildings out there that are energy hogs. Maybe they're older buildings, or there are, to meet the energy use intensity target would be impractical through cost-effective energy efficiency measures. They could be way off their target, way above it, and it may take years, if not decades, to get it down to the target. In those cases, it might not be the most cost-effective measure to meter those buildings if every compliance cycle you're going to have to comply through the investment criteria because you're not meeting the target EUI. So in those cases, when you've got a building it's going to be very difficult to meet the target. I would suggest you start with the investment criteria for the first compliance cycle, and continue to evaluate whether submetering makes sense for the future.
Okay, thanks, Luke. So this question, discuss financial incentive programs beyond the Commerce Early Adopter Incentive Program, specifically applicable to public schools. We have on the line Erin. Erin, do you want to talk about your program and any of the Clean Buildings team, if you're familiar with other programs or other grants that K-12 schools can apply for?
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, thanks, Alan, and good morning, everyone. My name is Aaron Dumas. I'm with the Clean Energy Fund program and the Clean Buildings team. But I'm the program manager for the Clean Energy Fund Building Electrification Grant Program. The grant has just opened up for applications this week. And it is there's a bucket of about $9.7 million available for building electrification projects. The projects fall under two tracks. One track is for grid interactive buildings or your smart buildings. And these are control technologies that allow buildings to communicate with the grid and demand response solutions. And then the second track is for fuel switching, so moving from fossil fuels or inefficient electric equipment to high efficiency electric equipment. Public K through 12 schools are eligible applicants as local government entities. So that posting is live right now on the website, which I'll stick here in the chat. Unfortunately, because we are in an active solicitation, I can't take any further questions at the moment, but all questions can be submitted in writing to cef@commerce.wa.gov, which I will also put here in the chat. And yeah, so that opportunity is there for schools. And then Annalyn, to answer your question also about other opportunities, maybe folks here are aware there's the Energy Efficiency and Solar Grant Program, which is kind of a sister program to the Clean Energy Fund, but they do energy efficiency and solar projects specifically for schools and other public agencies. And with that, that's all the information I have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. And like Annika said, the incentive program can be paired with your utility incentive programs as well. And does anyone else have anything they'd like to suggest? No?
There is funding available through Commerce through their energy retrofits for public buildings. And I'm pretty sure that applies to schools as well.
I think that's the one that Aaron was referring to, but I think that's the formal name of it.
Well, I think.
Yeah, and you might have some more information, Luke, since you helped with
it. It's not just solar grants, but other energy efficiency grants.
Okay, so we have a lot of questions, so we'll move on. This question came up. So I work for the Central Kitsap School District, and I'm in the process of editing and updating Energy Star profiles in preparation for the Clean Buildings Bill. Some of the building sites have portables classrooms that are metered separately for electric. If the portable classroom building is metered separately for electric, should I create a separate Energy Star profile for it? In some cases, the portable classroom buildings have their own electric meter, but they share a water meter with the main building.
Yeah, depending on how you're complying, if you're going to comply through a campus level, you want to include that meter data for the campus-wide EUI. So you create a building profile for the campus, which includes the GFA, gross floor area of the portables, including the energy consumption, regardless of how it's metered. There is no requirement within the standard, whether you're complying on the campus level or the tier 1 building level or complex level. There's no requirement to include portables if they are metered separately, because they're typically not going to be over 50,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you, Luke. All right, let's take some questions in the chat. Annika, do you have some questions?
I do. So if there is 1 meter for the building and associated portables, this was the question you just addressed right now. Do we include the portable square footage into the EUI calculation?
Yeah, so again, if the portable has been included in the EUI for the tier 1 building complex or campus, you include the energy and the GFA.
Thanks, Luke. Next one, similar. The individual buildings are less than 200,000 square feet, but the total when adding all buildings on the campus portables is greater than 200,000 square feet. What is the compliance date?
Yeah, that's a good question. And something that Commerce hasn't defined clearly at this point. Emily, I don't know if you have any comments on that one. You know,
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Commerce is in the process of developing guidance for that. I think it's very likely we'll have the compliance date based on the square footage of the largest building. Luke, I don't know if you want to expand on that, or we can just say guidance will be forthcoming. But we believe that based on the way the law is written, we don't really have flexibility to adjust that compliance date later.
Thank you, Emily.
Next question, do any organizations provide free benchmarking?
You know, I'm not sure what, if there are any organizations that do provide free benchmarking. I would check with your local, the school's utility provider and see what kind of resources they have. They do have what they call, several utilities in the state have what they call the Clean Buildings Accelerator Program. And they provide a certain amount of consulting and advice, but I'm not sure if there's any benchmarking services.
Michael mentioned here in the chat that McDonald Miller does for public agencies. Feel free to put in the chat anyone else who has an experience with any benchmarking services out there that we could share collectively. Okay, next question. Will Commerce be offering financial assistance to school districts that do not have capital budget funding available to meet the standards?
Luke, do you want me to field that question?
Sure.
Okay, and Annika, can you repeat it?
Sure. Will Commerce be offering financial assistance to school districts that do not have capital budget funding available to meet the standards?
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so this is a tricky one. I want to just, quickly emphasize Luke's earlier comments in the presentation about exemptions that we have available to us. Commerce has the authority to grant exemptions, one of which is for financial hardship. So in the case of school districts, if a school district has made every effort to fund the work necessary to comply with the Clean Buildings Law and not able to secure funding, an option would be available to submit for financial hardship. And if the district can demonstrate that they've taken every action that they can to secure funding and can't, then we would grant an exemption for financial hardship. That would be eligible for just that compliance cycle. So it would be something that would need to be reapplied for on an ongoing basis if future funding could not be secured. Regarding funding, Annika talked about the incentive program available through Department of Commerce. There's also utility incentive funds that can be added to the project to make it work as well. And then to add on to Randy's comment about the budget request, our Director Lisa Brown with Department of Commerce has also submitted a budget request to fund energy audits for public buildings to help with clean buildings compliance. Again, we don't yet have certainty or know where the budget is going to land until we move through the legislative process, but we do recognize that it's a barrier and challenge with compliance.
Yeah, and I would like to.
Can I just, I was the one that asked this question, and I guess, part of the issue is that many school districts, in order to fund this kind of thing, would have to use some of their capital budget money that they might have, they run these bonds for this kind of a thing. It's not very likely that they've got a lot of money for HVAC type systems that are in the millions of dollars in their capital budgets. So if they ran a capital budget or a capital bond just 2 years ago, they're probably not going to be going back out for another 2 years. When you say all efforts, do we have to demonstrate that we've gone out for a bond and it didn't pass, or that we won't be going out for a bond for another few years in order to try and generate this money?
Yeah, that's a great question, Charlie. Thank you for that. I mean, I think at this point in time, what we can say with certainty is we need to have documentation that all efforts have been made to secure funding. So if that's running a bond or a levy that was not successful or caused for the district to not be able to run one for a certain period of time, then that's all information that we would consider when evaluating that exemption.
Okay.
Yeah, and I want to note one more thing about the process towards compliance. The investment criteria in particular is designed to provide some allowances and working in conjunction with the energy management plan for the building, or for the portfolio or campus. So part of the investment criteria allows you to, you get the ASHRAE level 2 audit, you provide or conduct a life cycle cost analysis on the identified energy efficiency measures. And from that, you develop a list of what's deemed to be cost-effective energy efficiency measures. There is a provision within the standard that allows for what's called phased implementation. So within that list of cost-effective energy efficiency measures identified by the life cycle cost analysis, if any of those measures are not beyond their useful life currently, then their implementation can be delayed based on the scheduled or the predicted end of useful life. So if you are a school district and it's deemed to be cost effective to, let's say, replace the HVAC system in a building, but that HVAC system still is evaluated to still have a few years left of its useful life by the qualified person, that replacement can be identified in the energy management plan as well as within the energy audit with a schedule for replacement. And that may help kind of delay some of those bigger capital investments and give the school district time to plan for that replacement.
My sense is that you're going to want to have a follow-up meeting of some sort with more school districts to walk through something like that, Luke. With the 295 school districts and several thousands of buildings, I'm going to suggest, and particularly school districts that are in property poor locations outside of your major cities or industrial areas. As you can see in some of the comments, running bonds is not the easiest thing to do, and we've got super majority requirements. And so I just want to, I've been doing capital stuff for school districts for several decades, and I can just tell you that I think that you're going to see a number of school districts wanting to come in asking for exemptions, and it might be helpful for all of you to give a little bit more opportunity for building managers to understand just how different ways they might be able to comply. Because I know everybody's got to get started on it now. If you're looking at this thing, you know that you've got to start in 23, and then you've got a construction cycle. You can't necessarily do this construction while kids are in school. So your construction cycle requires that you do it from, I'm going to call it mid-June to mid-August, right? You're not just going to shut down your school for a whole year. So there's a lot of factors, I think, that complicate the K-12 arena in this game.
Great, that's a good suggestion. I'm more than happy to. I'll probably reach out to you, Charlie, and talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, I'd put Marissa Rathbone on there. I'd put Dan Steele on there, WASA and WASDA, and I'd also for certain put OSPI on this, because I can't reach to every school district. They have a much better opportunity to do that. And WMOA, I think it is, or WABOS, whoever the building people are, Dan Steele would know that too.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Next question. The early adopter incentive is a reimbursement model, correct? You have to meet the performance standard to get reimbursed. I can take this one. It is not a reimbursement model. It is a performance it's a performance incentive. So it's an incentive for meeting your EUI target. And I did notice further in the chat that there was a question about 15 months. So I also posted in the chat the guidebook for the incentive program. The way that it works is there's an application process. And if your application is approved, then you have a minimum of 18 months to implement your energy efficiency measures. You can request an additional 6 or 12 months if you need a little bit more time. That is a request that's built into the process. Once you concluded implementing your energy efficiency measures, and you move into the next phase of measure and verification reporting. We do require 12 months of consecutive data showing that you have met your target. If we do not have 12 consecutive months of data, we cannot issue the incentive. It's either a meet your target or you don't. There's no partial incentive for this. And that's why we built in the 18 months to provide some cush time if you're doing some fine tuning and showing that you could meet your target. But I would be happy to meet individually with anyone if you want to go through the incentive guidebook and talk through the details of it. There is a lot of information to just share really quickly here, but I'd be happy to meet with anyone. And then I'll go to the next question. Will compliance with the Clean Buildings Performance Standard exempt K12 schools from compliance with Landmarks Preservation Board requirements as priorities are at odds, i.e. preserve single pane windows for their historical legacy versus energy efficiency?
Yeah, there are provisions within the standard that allow for for you to avoid any energy efficiency measure that's deemed to be cost effective if it compromises the historic significance of a structure. So there are provisions within the standard to allow for that. It doesn't exist. There is no single exemption that allows you to be exempt from the entire standard based on historic significance, but individual measures that compromise that historic significance can be omitted.
Thanks, Luke. Next question. If the portable is metered separately, would it have its own EUI where they would share an EUI with the tier 1 building on the same campus?
Yeah, you know, if it's a campus, if you're going to comply on the campus level, you include the energy use for the whole campus and the GFA of all conditioned spaces on the campus, regardless if it's a portable or just an auxiliary building.
Thanks. The incentive of 85 cents for every square foot times 200,000 square feet equals 170,000. What projects would you recommend to bring into compliance with the Clean Buildings Performance Standard? Luke, can we share this one here? So the way the guidebook works is that one of the requirements is the building must have a level 2 audit performed on the measures. Am I getting this right, Luke? I feel like you explain it way better than I do.
Yeah, you know, so the incentive program is based on the target, meeting the target. The guidebook requires an energy audit, and it's listed as a level 2 energy audit in order to assure Commerce through the application process that proper analysis has been performed in order to assure Commerce that the target will be met, because we're going to be reserving funds. Now, we provided a little more guidance to the guidebook. We've updated it recently that says the intent of the audit for early adopter incentive purposes, again, is to assure that there's proper analysis done to assure that the target will be met. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to do a level 2 audit on every component of the building, but any proposed energy efficiency measure needs to have an analysis that's equivalent to the level 2 audit and show the interactions of those measures with each other.
So going back to the question, any recommendations for projects to bring the building into compliance? And that's where the audit would identify the measures that would bring the building to its target. And we don't, when it comes to the incentive program, and we don't care which variety of measures you use, really it's about meeting that target. And there are some great analysis that show if you do XYZ, this is your cost and will bring you to your target, or you can go more comprehensively and spend more funding to do that. So as Commerce, we don't have, as long as you meet your target, that's what we're looking for. And hopefully it's in a way where the cost isn't as high.
Yeah, utilities might be a good resource for
Yeah.
discussing your particular situation.
Okay, there are tons of questions, but we're at time. What I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate these questions. We're going to answer them and we're going to send it out to everyone that's registered and post it on our website as well. And we see that this is definitely needed for this group. We'll work on doing another event like this. Either it is the Q&A, only Q&A without any presentation, and we'll take the full hour of questions, or we'll focus on other ways of compliance that can help these in regards to that the conversation between Luke and Charlie. So thank you so much for attending today. This will be posted on our website for those who weren't able to make it, and a link will be shared via email. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your questions and participation. We are available for questions. Feel free to email us at buildings@commerce.wa.gov. Have a great day. Thanks.